Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, we're going to get into another harrowing conversation on timely events that are taking place in our lives right now. Creator reveals surprising hidden complications of systemic racism. This is a delicate topic, Carl.
Well, I know. It used to be that talking about Social Security was the third rail, so-called, of politics. You couldn't bring it up. You couldn't ever mention trying to rein it in or make any kind of adjustment. It was sacred. And I think now racism is the big hot button for everyone. Everyone's got opinions. Everyone has strong feelings and an emotional investment in all that's going on and what the outcomes might turn out to be. So it's important to get to the bottom of this and understand where this is truly coming from.
Right.
And the takeaway is this is not a human-caused problem even. This is something being imposed on us. And we want to get that through to people. We're not taking sides for or against any race of human beings. We're all people.
We're all human, yeah.
Race is only skin deep. It truly is. And everything else is due to cultural influences and social influences, how people are treated and how they're raised and all those factors that influence us.
Yes.
So let's get launched in and set the stage here, and we'll go along and hope we can hang this together.
Indeed. You ask Creator, are both blacks and whites programmed to have false beliefs about one another and themselves? If so, does this explain the origin of belief in systemic racism and support the conclusion that all such cultural beliefs about race are poisonous and need to be rejected?
All right. And as a channeler, a creator of all that is, we ask these questions to get divine perspectives and learn from the divine wisdom that comes forth. So this is what Creator says in answer to this question. Racism is a concept introduced by extraterrestrial interlopers. They created, through genetic manipulation of the human genome, the various races in existence today. This was not Creator's plan, but it has created an opportunity for the extraterrestrials to capitalize on the physical differences and attributes of the various races to create disorder and complicate human society by driving a wedge between the races to cause fear, suspicion, dislike, and even hatred. People inherently are drawn to their own group of friends, their own clan, the people whom they live with and share a community, and to be suspicious of outsiders until they become better acquainted. This is hard-won experience through the centuries when the appearance of foreigners was often a war party consisting of marauders or an invading army intent on destruction and theft of property, along with the taking of slaves as trophies. Such horrendous experiences harden people to expect the worst of outsiders, anyone who is outside the clan. When people are separated geographically, you also have physical differences setting them apart. It is all the more straightforward to create circumstances to arouse suspicion and mistrust and animosity. This is still true today and is on display on a regular basis with the tension between nation states that are chronically poised to take military action against one another as a reprisal for perceived overstepping of boundaries or other wrongdoing. This is simply an extension of the idea of creating divisions and warring factions. This is the main strategy of the interlopers, and it is being applied on all levels of society with the battle of the sexes, the tensions among generations based on age, differences in ethnic background, national origin, and of course, race, the subject of discussion here. All have been and are being used to create divisions, ramp up tension and stress, and create conflict, and if possible, chaos in society. The overall scheme of the interlopers is to drag down humanity in as many ways as can be arranged. And there's no better or more tried and true strategy than to induce humans to fight one another over perceived wrongdoing. Racist ideas are inculcated by a subliminal mind control manipulation to create suspicion, doubts about motives, character, trustworthiness, and reliability. This is directed at both black and white members of society and members of other races as well, in as many ways as are practical based on historical circumstances. Old grievances are perpetuated, new grievances are created as frequently as possible to add to the bad blood. This is why racism does not simply fade away, even though it is illogical and goes against the inherent nature of the divine human. But keep in mind, this is a strategy of the interlopers who are sociopaths, and they know how to manipulate human feelings and opinions. Human beings are love-based, but also vulnerable, and will keenly feel being disparaged, being disliked, being dishonored, and will want to create a backlash to counter the efforts directed at them, and may well carry out acts of physical violence to defend their honor. The fact that this happens with regularity does not mean it is a human characteristic per se. Only that people can be manipulated to carry out such acts and are therefore vulnerable to being manipulated and losing self-control in developing extremes of emotion, even directed in an irrational way towards a perceived adversary. Both blacks and whites in particular are heavily manipulated to reinforce prejudice against one another for all sorts of things that have historically been believed, and new things added along with shifts in cultural norms to keep the game going, despite a greater level of sophistication in today's world. Even with all the manipulation done, humans still maintain enough inner alignment and through power of free will, the good judgment to rein in their prejudices most of the time, to do what is right in giving people the benefit of the doubt and offering common courtesy with basic acceptance and fair treatment. Many times things will go well, and even friendships develop over time that transcend prior difficulties and create quite a barrier to rekindling the old fears and animosities. Because people through direct experience have outlived the usefulness of old prejudiced ideas. When that happens, the interlopers must find new talking points and potential grievances to stir up trouble. But this is not difficult when it is done covertly, and people are simply not aware they are under attack and being manipulated, and there can be many misunderstandings generated, as well as more overt acts of being inconsiderate, disrespectful, neglectful, that will start inner suspicions going. And this can feed old inner beliefs that are in effect dormant to be ramped up with emotion behind them, and then things deteriorate. This is what you face in today's world. The legacy of mind control programming to create many hair triggers on racial questions that can set off renewed friction with the consequential development of suspicion, mistrust, resentment, and eventually hatred, if no attempts are made to stop the progression. So what is systemic is a bias in thinking that is present within all races about many differing issues and perspectives that create perfect conditions for generating misunderstandings and conflicts and fit together like a hand in glove to create a path to war between the races. As such, it is entirely artificial. People are being duped, and if they give in to their impulses with any kind of perceived racial discrimination, This will light a fuse that may be unstoppable in escalating things to a very serious level with many dire consequences for the progress of humanity. It is time for humanity to take a close, hard look at how people have been manipulated on the issue of race and what this has done to create the current circumstances of hatred and mistrust that are frequently escalating into acts of civil unrest and violence. No good will come of it. That is exactly what is intended to happen. The interlopers are celebrating your self-destruction.
Well, that last sentence kind of says it all, doesn't it? I've had conversations with people about this, and the second you mention aliens as having any kind of input or cause behind the problem, immediately makes them wince and say something, like, oh, you're just trying to push responsibility off of us, And there's a point to be made there. I mean, we are responsible for straightening this out, but it also helps to know who all the influencers are.
Well, and I know this is the most problematic issue in all that we do in our outreach to wake people up and give them divine information and encouragement. We do that too. We're not always hitting people over the head with dark, dire pronouncements. But people are complacent, and this has to change.
Yes.
And I've been telling my family this. They're going to come. They're coming out of the closet one day, and they're going to be on TV, the aliens, and they're going to say, we're here to help you, and it's going to be a lie. They're hoodwinking us, and they're building up this slowly, this disclosure. Meanwhile, they're wreaking havoc everywhere to make us needy, to make us feel helpless and hopeless and not trust our leaders and not trust our institutions because they're corrupt. And everything is out the window now. You can't even trust law enforcement to enforce the law.
Yeah,
they're being manipulated too. We talked about that last week. They beat up on people, they abuse people because they're manipulated directly deep within their mind. This sounds like paranoid, delusional thinking, I grant you. But look at the world.
Yeah.
It is a consequence of delusional thinking and a kind of hallucination that is a hallucination of beliefs that bubble up, and then people are acting crazy and don't even realize it. And the rest is on the front page.
Yeah. I mean, people, you got to understand, you've heard the term brainwashing. And if you've done any research on this and seen how, prisoners were manipulated back in Korea, for instance, in Vietnam, there's ways to impact the human mind and change it against its will, essentially. And we're talking about a race of beings millions of years advanced of us, and they know us like a glove. Billions, yeah. And, understand that there's bigger things going on here, and that's what we're trying to bring to light. So just play along with us, be patient, and we're going to keep working on this. You ask Creator, what is Creator's perspective on systemic racism, and how is that problem most effectively addressed?
Right, and this is what Creator tells us. In most cases, the idea of systemic racism is a kind of racial prejudice being bandied about by individuals already biased against a racial opponent and making a sweeping summary judgment that members of another race are their enemy and are poised to cause harm and likely have done so already, and that one's difficulties in life are the responsibility and outcome of the enemy race and its members who have discriminated against them in various ways, even covertly. This is assumed to have happened, and that is the nature of the prejudice, that it is not based on facts and figures, but on assumptions, and deep interferes that this is so and has brought about constraints on life progress by standing in the way of happiness. In actuality, there is precious little systemic racism surviving. This is brought to people's awareness again and again and again. It has been complained about endlessly. It has been illustrated endlessly with example after example of unfair treatment and the painful consequences, such that every person alive recognizes the problem of racism as causing real trouble, unhappiness, and much bad blood that leads to problems of all kinds. Everyone understands that racism is not defensible. That does not mean there are no racists. The problem does persist in a minority of individuals because beliefs are beliefs and cannot be simply discarded if they prove to be unacceptable to others. People cannot simply change because their beliefs make them who they are. And beliefs are unalterable directly for the most part, even through force of will. Some people are able to set their beliefs aside and do many things in contravention, but that is unusual. Most people cannot do that very effectively and will not choose to go along with such an idea in the first place, knowing that it simply goes against the grain and is out of keeping with their character and their morality as they see it, and will rebel before simply marching in lockstep and carrying out some action that might be objectionable. When left to their own devices, most people get along just fine and see no reason to fear or dislike others of a differing race. There is no logical reason to do so, but this can be quite readily orchestrated to happen through subliminal programming, a campaign of disinformation carried out within the deep subconscious can ramp up hatred to a point where an ongoing conflict will arise that can get quite ugly under the right conditions. This is typically blamed on systemic racism when in fact it is a hidden manipulation of the individuals involved to hold those views and to act on them. While left to their own devices, people who hold racist opinions will not air them because there is self-awareness that to do so would be unkind and would put them in a bad light as much as the one they criticize. Because everyone knows in today's world that racism is wrong and at a minimum unfair. So there will be attempts to curb negative thinking that is extreme in mischaracterizing members of a race to disparage them. But that does not mean people will then rush to get along, become the best of friends, and so on. This is why healing is slow in coming in a kind of evolutionary process. It will happen incrementally and must be nurtured along the way by many people warming to the task at hand and wanting to curb the possibility of violence.
There's a lot revealed in this channeling. The most interesting to me, of course, is the difficulty with belief and the fact that maybe the best we can do is set our beliefs aside. It's really difficult to change them directly.
Well, this is the nut of the problem. It's contaminated everyone. It's a kind of poison. It poisons your thoughts and your feelings.
Yes.
And poisons the water in the well, and it seems endless. And like Creator is saying, there is a reason that it's all pervasive and that it doesn't go away simply because it's a bad idea, it's wrong-headed, and it's cruel, and it speaks ill of those who hold such beliefs. So this is telling that everyone knowing this still can't let go of it, some of us.
Yes.
And others are suspicious that this is going to continue and will never get better.
Yes. It's very complicated. And the thing is that because it's a feeling-based problem for the most part, emotional-based, and emotions don't just necessarily respond to a mental command to go away, this is what we're getting at behind the scenes with the healing, with the remote healing services that we do, to get into the deep subconscious and perhaps change some of these beliefs and help out taking away some of the sting of those feelings that are really complicating people's emotions and actions.
Yes.
Be sure to check out our healing services at getwisdom.com. We have a tab on our menu for healing. You can click on that and you can check out the services that we offer. You can also check out our download for the Lightworker Healing Protocol. That's at getwisdom.com/LHP to learn how to become a practitioner yourself. And we'll be back with more Get Wisdom right after this. Welcome back to the second segment of Get Wisdom. We are talking about systemic racism, a very, very timely topic, very sensitive topic, and one that's very challenging to navigate, Carl.
Indeed it is. It's a hot button for most people right now. And it's very insidious. And it's something that kind of contaminates everything it touches. And that's most unfortunate because there are real problems. And we need to navigate these treacherous waters and get through this and past it if we can.
Indeed. You asked Creator, a concern with placing an inordinate focus on systemic racism is that it presents a problem too big for the individual just trying to make their way through life to solve. It complicates things further in encouraging a belief that one's individual success in life is wholly handicapped by those of another race. Can Creator comment on whether this side effect is of concern and what the actual impact is in potentially disempowering individuals of color?
All right, and these are Creator's words. This is a real concern and a real issue as well. Most people are willing to get along and will not raise any questions about another person who differs from themselves. Everyone growing up is exposed to prejudice thinking about members of an opposite racial makeup. People will be alarmed when the differences between races become magnified and a reason to disparage people wholesale because of their racial heritage and to assume the worst potential outcome in situations and relationships in dealing with members of another race. This has been a problem many times where an initial hesitation that automatically is accompanied with distancing to avoid potential conflict relaxes a bit, and people begin to intermingle and interrelate, and then a deeper involvement takes place. And when there becomes a growing interdependency of differing racial groups, that is when racist ideas may come to the foreground and be a bone of contention to undermine many pre-existing alignments, so they will follow racial lines, and former friendships might be damaged irreparably as a consequence. Any kind of friction leading to disenchantment undermines future possibilities of getting along, sharing resources, helping one another in ways to economize and streamline, making improvements and forward progress, and advancing society on multiple levels. The reality is that racial tensions are unnatural. They are orchestrated to happen by producing circumstances that will conflict with inner feelings of prejudice about appropriateness and safety of differing racial groups congregating, interacting freely, and entering into competition, whether with sporting events or other contests of some kind. This is risky given that people are being pushed into finding ways to find fault and to ramp up conflicts in areas of disagreement that leave people unhappy and blaming representatives of another race for what has happened. There are many situations where feelings are inflamed and circumstances exaggerated to perceive damage being done, people taken for granted or neglected in some way, and so on, which may be blamed on the racial makeup of those involved. Such events are typically orchestrated to happen and will add to ongoing tensions and may serve as a catalyst for a worsening of things.
Yes. So everybody beware. There's manipulation going on, and it's something we really got to try to take stock of. It's very, very important.
Well, this is a contest between good and evil. You can think of it that simply. And if you think racism is evil, I would agree with that personally, and I think the divine would agree with that as well. That is its origin.
Yes.
So we need to stand for the true divine way of doing things, which is bring love as an answer.
Yes. Because racism is evil, but people of race are not. This is a misconception at the end of the day. And it's one that's imposed upon both sides in the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's stupid thinking.
Yeah.
You don't like someone who's say a person of color. What are they going to say? Well, my skin made me do it.
Right.
The whole idea is crazy that your skin pigmentation matters in any respect. So there's something completely illogical about this whole paradigm, and that's a tip-off. My friends, that something is behind this, controlling us to kind of make people think this way, because they wouldn't on their own. It's too stupid an idea.
It's a completely illogical, and literally it's just skin deep, and what layer skin is, millimeters, if that. You asked Creator another side effect of placing inordinate blame on systemic racism, and essentially blaming another race for all or even most of one's problems, is the fact that such an emphasis on assignment is not conducive to feelings of love and fellowship and brotherhood and sisterhood. Rather, such a belief would more likely engender feelings of animosity and antipathy and even naked hatred, which we are really starting to see on display with the recent outbreak of mass demonstrations and violence in response to police shootings. Can Creator comment?
All right, and these are Creator's words. It is a necessary part of growth and learning to put oneself in harm's way, so to speak, by making desires and needs known and taking the steps to learn about and experience what one needs to as a part of life. Most people will benefit from being part of a family unit and creating an extension of their own to find a life partner and make children and give them loving support along the way to develop their capabilities. With life having its difficulties, anything that puts people in competition with one another can be highly destructive. And when this is tied to perceived racial preferences and mistrust and dislike of one racial group's members by another, this is a prescription for having a confrontation at a minimum and an ongoing contest or even war of sorts on another. This is the danger of the idea of racial differences even mattering. The reason such notions are so damaging is they are unnatural. And when this is promoted to explain people's life circumstances, it can indeed be hurtful to consider the possibility of being looked down on. And the idea people are being actively sidelined and harmed by not truly being accepted as equals will cause lasting damage to human relationships, and potential acceptance as equals will cause lasting damage to human relationships and potential acceptance by members of a particular race that has become a perceived target of discrimination. There may, in fact, be no feasible way to return to higher ground. Once such ideas get going, become embraced by enough people, they will persist within the culture and be handed down from one generation to the next. This has kept some racism going heretofore as a constant presence among a minority of the population. The fact that it is perceived to be widespread and a problem almost universally experienced is an exaggeration and is based on a kind of racial prejudice in its own right. Instilling such ideas and beliefs is part of the process of creating racial tension to begin with. This must be worked at because it is so unnatural, and that is what puts the lie to the idea of systemic racism as a broad and meaningful explanation for general unhappiness and assumptions it is due to racial discrimination. These problems do not appear in a vacuum. They are created through a careful orchestration of circumstances and life experiences where there will be discomfort, disappointment, failings on display, and these will then be blamed on racial issues, and this will have consequences in influencing behavior and creating many areas of conflict to worsen things.
You know, the thing about racism that I'd like people to understand is that, humans are being manipulated to be at one another in terms of competition, in terms of conflict. The skin color is just one factor. If the skin color is absent, there's other factors that are brought into play. Sex, gender differences, differences in IQ, differences in athletic ability. It's anything that makes people different from each other can be used, has been used, to create conflict and hard feelings. This is what people really need to understand.
Human nature gone awry. People twisting their thoughts and feelings and beliefs almost beyond recognition. We're all born innocent. We're sweet little babies at one point in time. Yeah, we cry a lot, but we don't know enough to be mean.
Right.
And we learn how to do that.
Yes.
And racism gives us a tool to do that with. And that is what makes it so wrong and so awful wherever it exists. Even as an antidote to racism, it doesn't work. It just poisons everything it touches.
U.S. creator, another side effect emphasizing systemic racism is that it is not just minorities that can be mired in this belief. There is also the issue of believing this as a member of the race accused of causing the systemic racism, and therefore being responsible for all the hardship and suffering of other races throughout the ages. If taken to heart, such a belief would seem to have the potential to create an almost crippling level of guilt that we can see finding an outlet in so many whites championing minority movements and even counterintuitively supporting legislation that can only be aimed at restricting themselves and their freedoms and equality. Can creator comment?
All right, and these are creator's words. This situation occurs again and again and is a good illustration of the reality. It is orchestration, not a natural state of affairs that is cultivated purposefully within people by making choices to have discriminatory views about people of another race. Humans are manipulated from deep within their minds through a mind control manipulation process to have all kinds of negative beliefs that play on fears, increase tensions, and the points of friction created will have many consequences for how things play out, and it will ramp up passions as people seek to blame one another and associate the discomfort they feel or unfair treatment as being attributable to a racial difference, and that it is a characteristic of the other race, that people will be racially biased or exhibiting prejudice that results in unfair treatment. Once this gets going, it is hard to undo. It is not just people are reluctant to forgive, it is that it leads to corruption of inner beliefs and creation of false beliefs of all kinds. These cannot simply be dispensed with through reasoning it out in some way, or even through a realistic perception the beliefs are faulty and a disservice by exaggerating some perspective about members of another race. People will hold many beliefs about the matter at hand, and that is functionally akin to programming they must follow, because beliefs define who you are, and you must act on your beliefs unless you wish to surmount them in some way through a questioning about their usefulness and accuracy. Only rarely will people choose to do so actively. In most cases, people are passively acquiescing to what is brought up by their inner being in reaction to its inner beliefs, and they simply cannot act or be another way because they would no longer be themselves.
I think this crucial, this revelation on the nature of belief. Good-hearted people don't want to be racist. They don't want to have racist thoughts. They don't even want to be tempted to be racist, not even a little bit. And yet the subconscious programming is difficult to untangle. This is where healing is most important, and why we're bringing with our project, the Get Wisdom Project, this healing modality forward, because now we have a tool to get at these persistent, difficult, entrenched beliefs that even if the person themselves recognizes them, it can be very difficult to undo, but we have the tools to do that, Carl.
Yes, we're trapped in this quagmire, surrounded by negative beliefs of all kinds, self-limiting beliefs, faulty judgment and perceptions based on those beliefs, strong emotions, and fear based on those beliefs as well. And it's in one sense, it's a house of cards because it's based on lies. But lies can have a huge influence, and they can poison the culture and poison a generation and beyond. So we have to start somewhere. And if we get some divine healing going for this, that is the answer that can truly help here.
Absolutely.
Because we're not just in this ourselves, needing to heal ourselves and our culture and our own racial group and its biases. We're being reprogrammed in every new generation by the interlopers. And that's what makes this so intractable, So
Yes.
divine healing is the ultimate answer. And we'll be getting to that and discussing how that can be and what it takes. And we have the tools that we can share with you, prayer and using an advanced healing protocol that, yes, even deals with extraterrestrial influences.
Yes. It's very, very important. The people understand, I have a degree in psychology, Carl, and this difficulty of trying to undo beliefs is one of the biggest challenges I've ever investigated in my life. And this is one of the reasons why this is such an intractable problem, and one of the reasons why we need to look at new solutions that perhaps are completely from left field, because frankly, what we've been doing so far hasn't been working.
Well, and people need to have a measure of understanding and acceptance of one another despite appearances. People don't always put their best foot forward. And it's because they can't help them who they are. They can't help being themselves, especially when you're worked up with emotions. And we need to kind of help calm things down a bit and be a little more loving and gracious to one another under difficult circumstances. I know this is hard, especially for those who have been wounded and have been hurt. It's hard to live with that.
Indeed. Well, we'll get more into this when we come back with more Get Wisdom right after this. Welcome back to the final segment of Get Wisdom. We're talking and trying to sort out systemic racism, a very, very difficult and challenging topic that is a concern of everyone.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, a hot button for so many people. But I lament the situation getting to a point where you can't claim to be a good person. I mean, there are some good people. And we've got to gain a better perspective of things and build on what is positive that's there. Yeah, back in the dark, deep corners of everyone, there are dark thoughts because we've been subjected to prejudiced thinking. But, the fact you've got cobwebs in your closet does not define the worth of your being and the value of your soul, particularly with what you want to see in the world. That matters a lot more, I think, where people truly are coming from.
Absolutely. You asked Creator, white women in particular seem especially susceptible to feeling guilty about their own race, even though it was arguably white men that caused more of the problems throughout the ages. Is some of this attributable to women having their own identity struggles throughout the ages and will therefore empathize and resonate more deeply with this issue?
All right, and this is Creator's answer. This is certainly the case. Because women have been discriminated against based on gender, they can see more clearly how damaging it can be to have a prejudice against oneself because of the color of their skin, and how unfair that truly is, and how dehumanizing. So women who historically have been viewed as the weaker sex and denied for centuries the trappings of power and even a place in society outside the home have developed great sensitivity about fairness and the evils of discrimination based on unalterable physical attributes. But there are additional factors as well. The females of the species tend to be more loving and to feel things more deeply. They are more open with their feelings and operate more intuitively, trusting their inner feelings and what they feel in their heart as especially important and meaningful, and will more likely develop strong emotions when things are not going smoothly and there's any mistreatment of people owing to racial origins, given its dark history of causing so much painful suffering. This greater sensitivity does not mean women cannot be prejudiced like men. It simply means that they will take such matters more seriously and take it to heart and will feel much greater intensity about the need for change and will be more willing to support an ongoing quest to find solutions to the problems of race. This is a good thing because there needs to be progress on this front still. Even though it is not anywhere near as serious a problem as it was 100 years ago, there is still some work to do. The existence of fear and suspicion are all that are needed for the extraterrestrial alliance to ramp up fear and oversensitivity about race to drive a wedge between people.
Indeed, this is not anywhere near as serious a problem as it was 100 years ago. But that's not to say it can't become that way if things keep progressing the way they are. The thing is that, women are especially sensitive to this, and we need to be looking for a solution. And this is what our project is all about, is getting at the root cause of this trouble. And there's a lot that you can do, especially if you're sensitive and have a lot of compassion for people. There are real genuine things that you can do with Lightworker Healing Protocol to really help a lot of these problems and help individuals in particular.
Yes, and again, Creator returns to the fundamental issue. We've got an extraterrestrial problem.
Yes.
Racism is an extraterrestrial problem. That's where it comes from. Those are the sources and the origins of this in the first place. We've got to solve that. How do you do that? You don't have a clue, you listening out there. Who do you go to? No one will listen. No one will believe you. You need divine help for this.
And we need to go to the divine to get that help. That's important. We must ask for this assistance. U.S. Creator, you have told us that racism will not end until people can surrender the need for such beliefs. Can you explain how prayer work and the Lightworker Healing Protocol can help us heal the problem of racism given this difficulty?
All right, and this is Creator's answer. It is true that the problem of incorporated beliefs, including racist notions, become a considerable liability, especially because the divine realm cannot abrogate free will choices of human beings. So when they think and act on the basis of beliefs that are racist in nature, the choice to do so must be honored by the divine realm, even though it is hugely destructive when directed towards others who become victims, as well as for the self. And those who do so are, in effect, digging a grave for themselves through accumulating serious negative karma that will bring them no end of trouble in the future because of the need to make a repayment for all that they have caused in the way of harm. So far, karma alone has not done the job of producing a self-correction, a righting of the ship. But that is only because there is a wild card in play. And that is the deliberate intervention of the interlopers to keep instilling racist ideas in people. So the lessons cannot be learned and persist for long because people will be manipulated again and again and again to war with one another based on racial differences. And if it is not started by one party, it will be started by the other. And this will resurrect the old war as though no learning of lessons has ever happened. What is needed is very, very deep healing that can work on the problem around the edges and systematically peel away the layers that have contributed in setting the stage for the problem to develop and become instilled, and then all of the consequences resulting in harm to receive healing. This will take away the worsening that normally would escalate things and worsen them over the years. So this reduces the size of the problem. There are two aspects. If beliefs are there of a racist nature, the beliefs cannot be simply changed without the individual's direct permission. The next best thing is to undo the harm it has caused, and in that regard, in effect, it takes away the major consequences of the problem, because then the poison is confined to the individual harboring those beliefs. But the others who may have been hurt by their racist rhetoric or actions will have received healing, so the racists are only harming themselves by holding false beliefs and low intentions. And the act of causing harm means there will be a debt to pay for them in the future to rebalance things, because they are literally throwing the universe out of alignment to some degree by their thoughts and actions. So prayer and the Lightworker Healing Protocol both give the divine realm permission through direct requests to address these distortions of thinking and the corrupting influence of subconscious programming, the relentless propaganda being directed subliminally at all human beings on an ongoing basis. This healing outreach is providing alternatives. People can decide to not act on their beliefs. That is the first step towards healing. And that will have tremendous benefit to the world as a whole. If every racist confined their racism to their thoughts alone and not their words and deeds, the world would change overnight. Those individuals might die as racists technically because their beliefs are still being held within, but if not acted on, they will not be harming the broader world. That is all that needs to happen. And under normal circumstances, racism would simply die out as those people passed on and were not actively handing down their beliefs to others, so to speak, by contaminating their offspring with their poisonous thoughts and giving active demonstrations of racist thought that could be a model to others or incite people to create a backlash that would fan the flames and break out into a more severe kind of contest that would harden opinions and create new negative beliefs about the whole matter of race. So the healing by these strategies will go a long way to solving the problem, even if it cannot overturn beliefs themselves that are racist. If the consequences of the beliefs are prevented, the world will be changed for the better. Ultimately, what must happen is that the perpetrators who created racism in the first place and are manipulating humans to have their passions ramped up and to become overly sensitive to issues of race and to see racist motives where none may actually exist because they are being manipulated to misinterpret what they experience and to blame things on race that are not appropriate. Those interlopers whose dark influences make things worse must receive enough divine outreach and healing for them to stand down and stop their games. That will allow humans to truly heal and fully heal in a much more straightforward and pain-free fashion. This will prevent the roller coaster ride you've seen working its way through history, when there are gains and then losses again, as racist ideas come and go and are passed around and rear up in some places and then are over, but sprout again anew in a neighboring country, for example, and then might be exported to others. This is a consequence of the manipulation to keep these ideas current and build in momentum. This is not natural among the divine human community left to its own devices. There must be some kind of manipulation to impair judgment and override common sense. But that is the power of subliminal programming, to go directly into the deep subconscious and into the beliefs themselves to reshape, in effect, the operating instructions for human beings to be changed. And then the person will operate with a dysfunctional belief system, and there will be adverse consequences. Healing the perpetrators will allow the whole world to change, and quickly, and is the best route to improvements that will last. You can heal all the people you want to, but the extraterrestrial alliance will recreate racist thoughts and manipulate people into mistrusting one another and creating points of friction. And this will grow into conflict eventually, and then the world will be back where it started, in the grip of racial tension, race riots, and even a possible race war.
That's a negative way to end this channeling, and it's, possible race war. But the one line that really stuck out to me was, there must be some kind of manipulation to impair judgment and override common sense. The thing is, Carl, you can't repair a house in the middle of a hurricane. You have to wait till the hurricane is gone before you can truly repair the damage. I mean, you can try to prevent some of the damage from occurring by putting up boards or throwing a couch up against the door. There's things you can try to do to keep the house from collapsing. But you can't put a new paint job on the house. You can't put a new roof on the house in the middle of a hurricane. We have a lot of healing to do as a species. But we can't really begin to do that healing in earnest until the cause of most of our problems is out of here. We extraterrestrials and the dark spirits have to be brought to heal and removed. They have to leave from this environment in order for us to really have the space to heal like we need to, and to not have the problems cascade and worsen. So we need your help desperately, for sure. Yes,
and we've been told this time and again that humans were created to solve the problem of evil. We're not doing so well with that. And the reason is we have to do it in partnership with the divine realm. And so many people are turning away from spirituality, religion, whatever form they may have a natural affinity for. More and more are becoming secular. This needs to change. We have to get rid of the bullies to stop the beatings. You know, you can buy all the Band-Aids you want and lay in a supply and build more hospitals to take the wounded in. But until you get rid of the bullies, there's going to be more victims.
Yes.
Yeah, and that is why this is so important, so vitally important, that we deal with the interlopers. They're the ones bullying us with racist feelings and beliefs, and inculcating this madness, this poison that corrupts our thinking.
Yes. And you can help us by checking out our material at getwisdom.com. Check out the Lightworker Healing Protocol. You can get our ebook describing the protocol at getwisdom.com/LHP. And also check out our prayer book, because prayer is critically important. And our list of recommended prayers can go a long way to giving you protection and to helping others as well. Get that at getwisdom.com/prayer. And just check us out at getwisdom.com. You can become a participant member. It's eternally free, and you can check out hundreds of hours of content that we have for you to go through all of these topics that we talked about today. Carl, we're out of time. Thanks again, and we'll see everybody next week.
All right, be well.